All right, let's get ready for some Spanish. Today, we're going to try to take like your English-speaking brain, and we're going to kind of give it a Spanish upgrade.
Sounds fun.
We're diving deep into a Spanish language learning course, so we've got like, workbooks, lessons, and even some, cultural insights. But it's all tailored to make Spanish feel less like a foreign language,
Right.
more like English's, cool cousin.
Yeah. It's really amazing how much English can actually help you learn Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a springboard almost. Think of it like you're not starting from scratch. You already have a foundation
That's right.
and we'll be unearthing all those connections and patterns that make Spanish, surprisingly intuitive.
So we're not just learning Spanish, we're like hacking it,
Yeah.
using English as the secret code.
Yeah.
I love that. Where does this linguistic heist begin?
Well, right off the bat, the course kind of throws you a lifeline and it's called cognates.
Oh, cognates. Okay.
These are words that look and sound almost the same in both languages.
Oh, sure.
Like professor and professor, or importante and important. It's like giving away free vocabulary points.
It's like one of those like spot the difference puzzles
Yeah.
where half the work is already done for you.
Exactly.
And it's not just fancy academic words. Even something as delicious as chocolate is the same.
Exactly. And this is why cognates are such a powerful tool. I mean, they give you this like sense of familiarity, a foundation to build upon.
Yeah.
And the course encourages you to actively look for these like familiar faces in Spanish text. And you'll be amazed by how many words you actually already know.
Right.
And with that boost of confidence, you'll be ready to tackle, let's say, the parts that are more, well, uniquely Spanish.
Okay, cognates make me feel like I'm already speaking Spanish, but what about the pronunciation? The rolled R's,
Right.
those sultry Spanish sounds. How do we tackle those?
Well, the course has a great guide on pronunciation, and it dives right into those sounds. The ones that English speakers might trip up on. Let's take the rolled R, for example. It can feel really intimidating, but think of it as this gentle vibration at the back of your tongue.
Okay.
It's all about relaxing your tongue and letting the air flow.
So instead of trying to force it, it's more about finding that sweet spot where the sound just naturally flows.
Precisely. And like mimicking native speakers is key here. Find a Spanish show or like some music you love and try to imitate those sounds. It's like a workout for your tongue.
Right.
And speaking of sounds, the H in Spanish is silent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So el hotel sounds more like el hotel.
El hotel, okay.
Think of it as like a stealthy H.
A stealthy H, that's good. It's funny how some letters in different languages just disappear.
Right.
Anything else that might surprise our English-trained ears?
Well, the J sound, as in Jose, might throw you off a bit.
Yeah.
It's not quite like the English J.
Right.
Imagine a softer H sound, but it's made further back in your throat.
Okay.
Almost like a whispery H.
Okay. A whispery H for Jose. We're cracking the code here. Is there anything else we should be aware of on our quest for Spanish fluency?
Well, there's one sound that is subtle but really crucial.
Okay.
It's the T. In Spanish, it's softer with less aspiration than in English.
Gotcha.
So say the word taco, but imagine that T is almost like a D.
So taco, almost like a daco.
Yeah. It's a tiny tweak, but it makes a big difference in sounding more authentic.
I see.
And again, listening to native speakers is key to mastering those nuances.
So taco with a softer T, almost like a D. Got it. It's like learning the secret handshake of Spanish pronunciation. All right, we've tackled cognates. We're getting a feel for those Spanish sounds. What's next?
Welcome back to our Spanish deep dive. We've just begun to unlock the secrets of this fascinating language using English as our guide.
I'm so excited to keep going. We've
Yeah.
tackled those cognates and some of those tricky Spanish sounds.
Right.
But I know there's more to the language than meets the eye, or should I say ear.
You're absolutely right. Now let's dive into a grammar concept that often trips up English speakers. It's noun genders.
Noun genders. Okay.
In Spanish, every noun is either masculine or feminine.
Okay.
Like el libro, the book, is masculine.
Okay.
Or la casa, the house, is feminine.
I've always wondered about that. Like, it seems kind of random. Why does a book have to be masculine?
I know it might seem a bit arbitrary at first,
Yeah.
but there really is a system to it.
Okay.
Think of it this way. By assigning genders, Spanish creates like this beautiful harmony within a sentence.
Okay.
Like adjectives have to agree with the nouns that they modify,
Okay.
almost like they're wearing matching outfits.
So it's not about the book literally being male. It's more about creating a flow, a sense of agreement within the sentence.
Exactly. Like, for example, if you want to say the interesting book, you would say el libro interesante.
Okay.
See how interesante ends in EE? That's because it's modifying libro, a masculine noun. But for the interesting house, it becomes la casa interesante.
La casa interesante. Okay.
So the adjective changes to a because casa is feminine.
El libro interesante.
Yeah.
El casa interesante. Okay, so I'm starting to hear that rhythm, that agreement that you're talking about.
Right.
But how do we know which nouns are masculine and which ones are feminine?
Right.
Like, is it just a matter of memorizing a whole bunch of words?
Well, I mean, there are some patterns that can definitely help, but yeah, memorization does play a part. The course suggests some fun tricks, though,
Yeah.
like associating masculine nouns with the sun and feminine nouns with the moon.
The sun and the moon, okay.
It's just a way to create mental connections and make it easier to remember.
Okay.
And don't worry, with practice, it'll become second nature.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah.
So I could already see myself visualizing the sun and the moon to remember those genders.
Yeah.
What other grammatical adventures await us on this Spanish journey?
Let's talk about verbs.
Verbs, okay.
I mean, they're the engine of any language, and Spanish verbs definitely have their quirks. One that throws English speakers for a loop is that Spanish has two words for to be.
2 words for to be.
Yep.
Okay, what are they?
Ser and estar.
2 words for to be. Now that sounds like a recipe for confusion. Why the double trouble?
It's actually not as confusing as it seems. I mean, each verb has a specific role,
Okay.
and it all comes down to, like, this distinction between permanent qualities and temporary states.
Permanent and temporary. Okay.
So ser is for essential traits, like the things that define who you are. Like soy alto, meaning I am tall. That's a permanent quality.
You're not going to suddenly become short.
Exactly.
So ser for the unchanging, like the core aspects are, so soy alto. I'm picturing like, a tall person standing proudly, their height being a defining feature.
Yes.
What about estar then?
Right.
When do we use that to be?
Estar is more for like temporary states, things that come and go. Think feelings, locations, conditions that can change.
Okay.
Like estoy cansado, which means I am tired. Being tired is a temporary state. I mean, you can get some rest and then poof, it's gone.
Estoy cansado.
Yeah.
Oh, I can practically hear the yawn in that sentence. So, serasing for the lasting, and estar for those fleeting moments.
Exactly.
But I imagine there are some tricky cases, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what if you're talking about someone's personality? Isn't that both permanent and subject to change at the same time?
You've hit on one of those fascinating nuances of language.
Really?
Yeah, and in those cases, we would often use ser.
Yeah.
Like, for example, ella es amable, meaning she is kind.
Okay.
Even though someone's kindness might vary in different situations, we generally consider that like a part of their core personality.
So, ella es amable. It's a statement about her nature, even if her kindness might ebb and flow in different circumstances. I'm starting to see the logic behind these two to-be verbs.
Yeah.
They're like, Spanish is giving us this like more precise way to describe the world to capture those little subtle shades of meaning that English might just gloss over.
You got it. It's all about nuance. Spanish is all about nuance and expression. It encourages you to be precise. Like paint vivid pictures with your words.
Yeah. Okay.
And speaking of painting pictures, let's move on to a concept that's vital for constructing those intricate Spanish sentences. It's direct and indirect object pronouns.
Pronouns.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of grammar. But I gotta admit, I'm a little fuzzy on the difference between direct and indirect objects.
Oh, sure.
Can you break that down for us?
Of course. Let's think back to our English class days.
Okay.
Remember that a direct object is the thing that directly receives the action of a verb.
Okay.
So, for example, in the sentence, I eat the apple.
Okay.
The apple is the direct object because it's the thing being eaten.
Right, the apple is the target of the eating action.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do pronouns come into play here?
Well, in Spanish, instead of repeating the noun, we can use a direct object pronoun to make the sentence more concise, a little more elegant. So instead of saying, yo como la manzana, meaning I eat the apple,
Right?
we can say yo la como, literally, I eat, where la replaces la manzana, the apple.
Yo la como. So it sounds a lot smoother than repeating la manzana again.
Right.
Like Spanish is streamlining that sentence, making it flow more beautifully.
Exactly.
But what about indirect objects?
Right.
Where do they fit into this grammatical puzzle?
An indirect object is like the recipient of the action, often answering the question to whom or for whom.
Okay.
For example, in the sentence, I give the book to Maria.
Quite.
Maria is the indirect object because she is the one who receives the book.
Right, so Maria is the lucky recipient of that book.
Yeah.
How would we express that using an indirect object pronoun in Spanish?
Well, instead of saying yo doy el libro a Maria,
Yeah.
we can use the indirect object pronoun le to replace a Maria. So the sentence becomes yo le doy el libro. Literally, I saw her give the book.
Okay.
And notice how the pronoun le comes before the verb, indicating that we're giving the book to someone.
Yo le doy el libro. So it's like we're highlighting that act of giving to Maria by putting that pronoun right there before the verb.
Exactly.
It's almost like Spanish is saying, look, we're giving this book to someone special.
Yes.
But what happens if we have both a direct and indirect object pronoun in the same sentence?
Oh, good question.
Does it become a grammatical traffic jam? Welcome back to our Spanish deep dive. We're on like the last leg of our journey here, and I'm feeling pretty confident about my Spanish skills already.
That's fantastic to hear. I mean, confidence is really key when you're learning a new language.
Right.
But, don't worry, our journey isn't over just yet. We've explored some key grammar concepts, but now let's delve into what happens when a direct object pronoun and an indirect object pronoun, kind of collide in the same sentence.
That sounds like it could get complicated. Do those pronouns like end up in a grammatical fender bender?
Not at all. Spanish actually has a very elegant way of handling this. So when both a direct and indirect object pronoun, appear in a sentence, they team up and they always go before that conjugated verb,
Okay.
with the indirect object pronoun always taking the lead.
So it's like a pronoun power couple always appearing side by side.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us an example of this this dynamic duo in action?
Let's say you want to say, I give it to her in Spanish, referring to a book.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of saying, yo doy el libro a ella, which is that longer form, we can use pronouns to make it snappier.
Okay.
So it becomes lo, the direct object pronoun for masculine singular nouns like el libro.
Right.
And then to her becomes le, the indirect object pronoun. But remember, they always go before the verb with le coming first, so it becomes yo le lo doy.
Yo le lo doy. It sounds like a tongue twister. Is there any way to make it like flow a little easier?
You're right. Sometimes those pronoun combos can sound a bit clunky. So Spanish has this special rule for that. When le or les come before lo, la, los, or las, they kind of transform into se for smoother pronunciation.
Say. Okay.
Think of it as like a pronoun chameleon adapting to its surroundings.
Right.
So instead of yo le lo doy, it becomes yo se lo doy.
Yo se la doy. Oh, that's much better. It rolls right off the tongue. It's amazing how Spanish has these little shortcuts to make things sound so elegant.
It's all about finding that musicality, that flow that makes Spanish so captivating. And speaking of captivating, let's talk about those verbs that change their stems like chameleons. Remember, we touched on this earlier with querer and preferer.
Right. Those verbs where like the vowel and the stem changes depending on who's doing the action.
Exactly.
It's like they have a secret identity.
Yes. And there are some common patterns to these stem changes. For instance, sometimes an E will change to EE in certain conjugations, like querer, meaning to want.
Queerer. Okay.
So yo quiero, meaning I want, becomes nosotros queremos. When we're talking about we, it's like the verb is, putting on a different outfit for different occasions.
Yo quiero. Nosotros queremos. Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see those patterns emerge.
Right.
It's like cracking a code.
It is. It is. And that's a great way to approach these stem-changing verbs. Instead of memorizing every single form, try to understand that underlying logic, the patterns that govern these changes. And the more you kind of expose yourself to these verbs in action, the more natural they will become.
So it's like learning the dance steps, like finding the rhythm of the language.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of rhythm, the course also emphasizes the importance of intonation, that like rise and fall of the voice that gives Spanish its distinct musicality.
Yes. Intonation is like punctuation for spoken language.
Right.
It can completely change the meaning of a sentence.
Really?
The best way to master this is to listen to native speakers. Pay attention to how their voices inflect and try to kind of imitate those patterns.
So it's not just about saying the words correctly. It's about capturing that essence of Spanish expression, like the emotion that's kind of woven into the language.
Precisely. And speaking of woven into the language, let's talk about those colorful threads that add so much personality to Spanish.
Yeah.
Idioms.
Idioms. I love idioms.
They're those quirky sayings that often have this figurative meaning, adding a touch of humor and cultural insight to everyday conversations.
I love idioms. It's like these little windows into the soul of a culture.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite Spanish idiom?
Oh, of course.
One that we can unlock together?
One that I find particularly delightful is estar como una cabra, which literally translates to be like a goat.
To be like a goat. Okay.
But its real meaning is to describe someone who's feeling a bit, wild or crazy or out of control.
Estar como una cabra. Haha. I love it. It just paints such a vivid picture in my mind. It's like Spanish is saying, don't just tell me how you feel, show me.
Exactly. Idioms add this layer of color and personality, that makes a language come alive. And now, let's face, I think, the ultimate rule breakers of the Spanish language.
Okay, what's that?
Irregular verbs.
Irregular verbs. They're like the rebels of the Spanish language, marching to the beat of their own drum.
Right, but I have a feeling they're also hiding some, fascinating stories about the evolution of the language.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, irregular verbs often reflect those historical twists and turns of a language, offering glimpses into those ancient roots.
Right.
And while they may seem daunting at first, the course provides some really helpful strategies for taming those wild verbs.
Okay.
For instance, you can group them by patterns or create flashcards to practice those, unique conjugations.
It's like a detective game. You're uncovering those hidden patterns and connections. It makes learning irregular verbs feel less like a chore and more like this exciting challenge.
Yeah. That's the spirit. Remember, every challenge that you overcome brings you closer to fluency. And as we wrap up our deep dive into Spanish, let's reflect on why we even, embarked on this linguistic adventure in the first place. I mean, what are we hoping to gain by learning this beautiful language?
Well, for me, it's all about, opening doors to new worlds, new cultures, new perspectives. Speaking Spanish allows me to connect with people in a more meaningful way. To understand their stories, to experience their world through a different lens. It's like expanding my horizons, both geographically and mentally.
Beautifully said. Learning a language is so much more than just memorizing those words and grammar.
It is.
It's about, broadening our understanding of the world, fostering empathy and connection, and unlocking this whole new realm of experiences.
Couldn't agree more. So as we say goodbye to our Spanish deep dive, let's keep those motivations in mind. We've explored the intricacies of Spanish grammar, decoded those tricky pronunciation sounds, and even ventured into that colorful world of idioms and irregular verbs. But the real journey begins now as we continue to explore the richness and beauty of the Spanish language.
Absolutely. Here's to unlocking the magic of Spanish and embracing all the wonders that it has to offer. Hasta la próxima.
Adios, amigos. And remember, keep those Spanish sparks flying.